After I was widowed, my daughter said, "Either you get a job or you're out on the street." In desperation, I agreed to serve as caregiver to a paralyzed billionaire. On the very first night, I stopped cold at what I witnessed. The greedy one crawled back begging. Can you imagine losing your husband of 45 years, only to have your own daughter throw you out of your own home 3 weeks later? What if that was just the beginning of the betrayal? I was standing in my kitchen, a place filled with a lifetime of memories, thousands of meals cooked, countless conversations shared. My hands, still trembling from Dante's funeral, reached for the coffee pot, trying to find some semblance of normal. That's when Harlow walked in. Her face was set, cold. I knew that look. It meant her mind was made up, and my feelings? They simply didn't matter. "Mom, we need to talk." She placed her designer purse on the counter with a sharp, echoing click. Harlow, at 42, had inherited her father's strong jawline, but none of his warmth. "This arrangement," she said, her voice crisp and businesslike, "isn't working anymore." Arrangement? I was still wearing my black dress from the cemetery, the heavy grief of saying goodbye to Dante after 45 years of marriage still pressing down on me. "What arrangement, honey?" I whispered. "You living here in my house." The words cut me. Daddy left everything to me, remember? And I can't afford to support you anymore. The coffee cup slipped. It shattered against the tile, brown liquid spreading across the white pieces like my life was suddenly breaking apart. "Harlow," I pleaded, my voice barely there, "it's only been 3 weeks since Daddy died." She didn't even look at the mess. "I know, Mom. But life goes on. I have my own family to think about. My own bills." I knelt, my 68-year-old knees protesting with every creak, to pick up the pieces. "I have my Social Security," I offered, desperate. "It's not much, but I can contribute. $800 a month." Harlow let out a short, humorless laugh. "That doesn't even cover the utilities." My heart sank. "Look," she continued, "I've been thinking about this. And I have a solution." I stopped cleaning, looking up at my daughter, the baby I'd rocked through countless sleepless nights, the little girl who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms. "What kind of solution?" "There's a job. Private nursing. The pay is excellent." She pulled out her phone, showing me a listing. "This man needs round-the-clock care. You were a nurse before you married Daddy. It's perfect." My stomach dropped. "Harlow, I haven't worked as a nurse in over 40 years. Medicine has changed. I wouldn't even know how to." "It's not medical nursing, Mom. It's more like companionship, helping with daily activities. You can do that." She was already scrolling, sealing my fate. "I already contacted them. You have an interview tomorrow." I stood up slowly, ceramic shards still embedded in my palm. "And if I don't get the job?" Harlow finally looked at me, and I saw my answer in her eyes before she spoke. "Then you'll need to find somewhere else to live." "I'm sorry, Mom, but I can't carry you forever." Not carry me after everything I'd done. The next morning, I stood outside a mansion that looked like something out of a movie. The driveway alone was longer than our old street. My hands shook as I rang the doorbell. How had my life come to this? At 68, just widowed, I was applying for a job I wasn't qualified for because my own daughter had effectively thrown me out. A stern woman in her 50s, Patricia, Mr. Hawthorne's house manager, answered. The inside was even more intimidating. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, artwork that probably cost more than my entire nursing career. Patricia led me through halls lined with portraits of people who'd never known a day of financial worry. "Mr. Hawthorne requires assistance with most daily activities," she explained. "He's paralyzed from the waist down following an accident 5 years ago. The position includes room and board, plus a very generous salary." She paused at double doors. "Before we go in, I should warn you. Mr. Hawthorne can be difficult. He's had 17 caregivers in the past 2 years." My heart sank. 17? What had I gotten myself into? Patricia opened the doors. It was a massive library with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking manicured gardens. There, in a wheelchair by the window, sat a man with silver hair and strong features that must have been devastatingly handsome in his youth. "Mr. Hawthorne, this is Hilda Thompson, the candidate we discussed." He turned his wheelchair and the strangest sensation washed over me. His eyes were blue, that deep, arresting blue you only see in old photographs or faded memories. When his gaze met mine, something flickered. Recognition? Confusion? I couldn't tell. Mrs. Thompson, his voice was deep, cultured, with a hint of something I couldn't place. Please sit down. I lowered myself into the chair, trying to ignore how my heart had started beating faster. There was something about his face, the way he looked at me, that made my chest tighten with an emotion I couldn't name. Patricia tells me you were a nurse, he said, his eyes never leaving my face, studying me, searching. Yes, sir. Many years ago, before I married. My voice was steadier than I felt. And your husband recently passed away. I'm sorry for your loss. It wasn't a question. Thank you. I glanced at my hands, still wearing Dante's ring. It's been difficult. When I looked up, Terence Hawthorne was still staring, that intense, almost desperate expression. Have we met before, Mrs. Thompson? There's something about you that seems familiar. My blood ran cold. I forced a polite smile. I don't think so, Mr. Hawthorne. I'm sure I would remember. But even as I said it, alarm bells screamed in my head. Because there was something familiar about him, too. Something about the shape of his mouth, the way he tilted his head. It made my hands tremble, my breath catch. Perhaps not, he murmured, unconvinced. Tell me, Mrs. Thompson, why do you want this position? The honest answer? I was desperate. My daughter had thrown me out. I had nowhere to go. At 68, I was too old, too tired to start over. But I had no choice. Instead, I said, I believe in taking care of people. I always have. Something in his expression softened. And you're not afraid of challenging situations? I thought about Harlow's cold eyes, cleaning my broken coffee cup as she watched, sleeping in the guest room because she'd claimed my master bedroom. No, sir, I said, my voice firm. I'm not afraid. Terence nodded. Patricia, would you give us a moment alone? Once she left, he wheeled closer. Mrs. Thompson, I'll be frank. I'm not an easy man to work for. I'm demanding, particular, and I don't suffer fools gladly. But if you take this position, you'll be treated with respect and paid well. Very well. He named a salary that made my head spin. More money than Dante had made in his best year. However, he continued, I need someone I can trust. Someone who won't gossip about my personal affairs or treat me like an invalid. Can you be that person? I looked into those blue eyes, feeling that strange flutter of recognition again. Yes, Mr. Hawthorne. I can. Good. He extended his hand. When our fingers touched, a jolt of electricity, nothing to do with static, shot through me. Welcome to my home, Hilda. The way he said my name, soft, almost reverent, made my heart skip. I pulled my hand back, telling myself I was imagining things. I was a widow, a grandmother. I had no business feeling anything for this man. But as Patricia showed me to my quarters, I couldn't shake the feeling that my life had just taken a turn I wasn't prepared for. And the way Terence Hawthorne looked at me, like he was seeing a ghost from his past, made me wonder if I was about to discover something I'd spent 48 years trying to forget. My first week at the Hawthorne mansion felt like living in a beautiful prison. My room was larger than my entire apartment with Dante, with a bathroom that sparkled like a luxury hotel. But every morning, the crushing weight of my new reality, at 68, I was essentially a live-in servant. Terence was exactly as Patricia warned, demanding, particular, sharp-tongued. Coffee at 7:15, not 7:20. Newspapers in specific order. Medication rigidly on schedule. God help me if I was a minute late. But then there were those moments, quiet pauses between commands, when I'd catch him watching me, that intense look, as if solving a puzzle that haunted him. Hilda, he said one Thursday, as I arranged his breakfast tray. That's an unusual name. Family name, I replied, cutting his grapefruit. My grandmother's. She was German. German, he repeated thoughtfully. And where did you grow up? Here and there, I kept my voice neutral, but my hands trembled. My father moved around a lot for work. It wasn't entirely a lie. We'd moved, yes, but more from creditors and gambling debts. Some memories were better left buried. That afternoon, while Terrence napped, I finally unpacked the 3 boxes Harlow grudgingly allowed me to take. Clothes, books, my jewelry. But at the bottom of the last box, wrapped in tissue paper, was something I'd almost forgotten: my old photo albums. I'd packed them without thinking, probably because I'd been looking through them during those lonely nights after Dante's funeral. Now, in the elegant chair by my window, I unwrapped them. The first was from my marriage to Dante, our wedding, baby Harlow, vacations. A lifetime of respectable memories. I set it aside. I reached for the older one, the one I rarely looked at. Faded blue leather, cracked corners. Photographs from before Dante, before marriage, before the careful, controlled existence I'd built. The first few pages were innocent: high school, nursing friends, young, hopeful parents. But as I turned the pages, my breath hitched. On page 12, a photograph that made the world tilt sideways. I was 20, in a yellow sundress I'd sewn myself. Long, dark hair, head thrown back, pure joy. And beside me, his arm around my waist, his face lit with a smile that could melt hearts, was a young man with dark hair and devastating blue eyes. Terry Hawthorne. My hand shook so violently I almost dropped the album. Terry. Not Terrence. Terry, who loved jazz music and chocolate ice cream, and the way I looked in that yellow dress. Terry, who promised to marry me when he made his fortune. Terry, who kissed me goodbye on a train platform 48 years ago and never came back. I stared at the photograph until my eyes burned, trying to reconcile the young man with the silver-haired man downstairs. The features were the same. Those aristocratic cheekbones, the strong jaw, the eyes that seemed to see straight through to your soul. But young Terry had been warm, passionate, full of dreams. This Terrence Hawthorne was cold, controlled, bitter. What had happened? I turned the page, finding more pictures. Terry and me at the county fair, sharing cotton candy. Terry teaching me to dance in my tiny apartment. Terry and me by the lake, my head on his shoulder, both of us looking like we believed love could conquer anything. The last picture, him leaving, his suitcase at his feet, me crying. I remembered that day, painfully clear. He cupped my face, promising to be back in 2 years, rich enough to give me everything I deserved. "I'm going to make something of myself, Hilda," he'd said, voice thick with emotion. "I'm going to build an empire, and then I'm coming back for you. Will you wait for me?" And I had. God help me, I had meant it. But 2 years stretched to 3, then 4. His letters became sporadic, then stopped. I heard he'd made it big in real estate. By then, I'd met Dante, sweet, steady Dante, who loved me unconditionally, who didn't need to conquer the world to prove his worth. I married Dante. 6 months later, Terrence, finally sent word. The letter was still there, tucked behind the last photo. I pulled it out, trembling, knowing every word by heart. Asterisk, my dearest Hilda. I've done it. Everything I promised you and more. I'm coming home next month, and then we can finally begin our life together. I've bought a house, our house, and I can't wait to carry you across the threshold as my wife. All my love, all my dreams, all my tomorrows belong to you. Forever yours, Terry. Asterisk, it was dated 3 weeks after my wedding to Dante. I pressed the letter to my chest, tears streaming. All these years, I'd convinced myself he'd forgotten me, that his promises were empty words. But he had kept his word. He had come back for me. I just already belonged to someone else. A soft knock made me jump. I shoved the album and letter under a pillow, wiped my eyes. "Come in." Patricia entered, concerned. "Mrs. Thompson, Mr. Hawthorne is asking for you." He seems agitated. I smoothed my hair, my heart hammering. Could he have remembered? Was that why he'd watched me? I found Terrence in his study, staring out the window. He turned, and I saw something different. Not cold control, but raw vulnerability. "Hilda," he said quietly, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to tell me the truth." I clasped my hands. "Of course, Mr. Hawthorne. Have you ever been to Millbrook? It's a small town about 2 hours north of here." My breath caught. Millbrook. Where I'd grown up. Where I'd met Terry. Where I'd fallen in love for the first time. I'm not sure, I lied, but my voice betrayed me. He studied my face. There was a diner there, Murphy's, I think it was called, and a little lake where young people used to go on Sunday afternoons. The color drained from my face. Murphy's Diner, where he bought me cherry cokes and told jokes that made me laugh until my sides hurt. The lake where he first kissed me. Mr. Hawthorne, I think perhaps you're confusing me with someone else. But I saw in his eyes he wasn't confused. The mask was slipping, revealing the man I'd once loved with every fiber of my being. Perhaps, he said softly. His gaze fixed on mine. As I turned to leave, I heard him whisper, a low rumble that nearly buckled my knees. *yellow dress star. You always looked beautiful in yellow. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, Terry's young face from the photos, his voice promising to return. And downstairs, the man he'd become was probably awake too, piecing together the same memories that were tearing my heart apart. By morning, I made a decision. I couldn't pretend. The charade was eating me alive, and it was clear Terry, was remembering more each day. Better to face the truth than let it destroy us slowly. I found him in the conservatory, sunlight catching his silver hair, momentarily superimposing the young man of dreams onto the lonely, successful man he'd become. "Good morning, Mr. Hawthorne." I set his coffee down, my hands surprisingly steady. "Hilda." He looked up, exhaustion in his blue eyes. "Did you sleep well?" "No," I said honestly. "Did you?" A ghost of a smile. "No. I kept thinking about yellow dresses and cherry coke at Murphy's Diner." My breath caught. No point denying it. The cherry coke was too sweet. "You always said I should get vanilla, but I was stubborn." He closed his eyes. When he opened them, they were bright with unshed tears. "Hilda Marie Brennan," he whispered, "you wore your grandmother's locket and had a scar on your left knee from falling off your bicycle when you were 8. I touched my throat, where the locket used to rest. "You gave me a ring," I said, my voice thick, "a little silver band with a promise that someday you'd replace it with diamonds. I still have it. I've carried it with me for 48 years. We stared across the space separating us, not just a few feet, but decades of different lives, choices, loves. "Why didn't you tell me who you were?" he asked. I sank into the chair, suddenly feeling every one of my 68 years. Because I was afraid. Because I'm not the girl you remember. Because I took a shaky breath, because you're not the boy I remember either. He nodded slowly. "When I came back and found out you'd married Dante Thompson, I wanted to hate you. I told myself you'd never really loved me, that you'd just been waiting for someone better. That's not true." The words burst out more forcefully than I intended. "I waited, Terry. I waited until I couldn't anymore. Your letters stopped. I wiped a tear, I thought you'd forgotten me." "I never stopped writing," he said quietly. "But my business partners convinced me a small-town girl would hold me back. They intercepted my letters, told me you'd moved on." The cruelty of it hit me like a physical blow. All those years of wondering, feeling abandoned, when he'd been trying to reach me. "By the time I realized you were married." He reached into his jacket pocket, pulling out a small velvet box. "I hired a private investigator to keep track of you. I know it sounds terrible, but I needed to know you were happy. I knew when Harlow was born, when you moved, when Dante got promoted, even when he got sick." I stared, shocked. "You've been watching me for 48 years? From a distance. Never interfered. I needed to know you were all right." He opened the box. The silver ring he'd given me, the one I'd returned in tears before my wedding to Dante. "You kept it," I whispered. "I kept everything. Every photo, every letter you wrote, every memory." He looked down at the ring. "I never married, Hilda. I told myself it was because I was too focused on business. But the truth was simpler. No one else was you." The weight of his words settled between us. 48 years of loneliness, of building walls, watching the woman he loved live her life with someone else. "Terry, I didn't know what to say. How do you apologize for a lifetime of separation neither of you chose?" "I don't blame you," he said. "You made the right choice. Dante was a good man. He loved you the way you deserve, and he was there when I couldn't be. I've made my peace with that." "Have you?" I asked softly. "Because the man I've been working for these past weeks doesn't seem at peace with anything." His jaw tightened. The accident changed me. 5 years ago, I still held on to the fantasy that maybe someday we'd meet again, a second chance. Then I woke up paralyzed, and I realized how foolish I'd been. What could I offer you now? A broken man in a wheelchair. Stop. I stood abruptly, anger flaring in my chest. Just stop. Do you think I'm so shallow that your legs matter more than your heart? Do you think I'm the kind of woman who would turn away from someone I cared about because they needed help instead of being able to give it? He looked startled by my vehemence. Hilda, I loved you, Terry. Not your potential fortune. Not your grand plans. I loved the boy who brought me wildflowers because he couldn't afford roses. The boy who held me when I cried about my father's drinking. The boy who believed in dreams so fiercely I couldn't help but believe too. I was crying now, 48 years of suppressed emotion pouring out of me like water through a broken dam. And if that boy is still in there somewhere, then everything else is just details. He reached for my hand, and I let him. His fingers were older, thinner, but his touch still sent electricity through me. He's still here, he said quietly, buried under a lot of bitterness and disappointment, but still here. The question is, what do we do now? I looked around the conservatory, then back at his face, searching for an answer. Are you happy, Terry? Really happy. He was quiet for a long moment. I was successful. Respected. More money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. But happy? No. I don't think I've been truly happy since the day I left you on that train platform. Then maybe, I said carefully, it's time to stop punishing ourselves for choices we made when we were different people. Maybe it's time to see what the people we are now could build together. He brought my hand to his lips, kissing it gently. Would you be willing to try? Not as my nurse, but as whatever we could be to each other. I thought about Harlow, the cold house, the lonely apartment I'd been planning. Then I looked at the man who'd loved me faithfully for nearly 5 decades. Yes, I whispered. I'd like to try. But even as the words left my lips, I knew our path wouldn't be easy. Harlow would have plenty to say, and I doubted it would be congratulatory. She certainly wouldn't approve of her mother finding love again. The thought of facing her made my stomach clench. But for the first time in weeks, I also felt something else. Hope. Maybe it wasn't too late for second chances after all. 3 weeks after our confession, Terry asked me to move into the master wing. Not as his caregiver, but as his companion. The word felt strange on my tongue. Companion. It sounded so much more meaningful than employee, yet not quite as binding as the words we'd once dreamed of using. You don't have to decide right now, he said over dinner in the smaller dining room we'd started using. But Hilda, I want you to know this isn't about convenience or loneliness. This is about the life I should have been living all along. I set my fork down, my appetite suddenly gone. Terry, I need to tell you something about Harlow. He grew serious. What about her? She doesn't know who you are. When she found this job for me, she just saw dollar signs. A wealthy man who needed care. A mother she wanted out of her house. She has no idea about our history. He nodded slowly. And you think she'll have a problem with our arrangement? I laughed, but it was hollow. My daughter threw me out 3 weeks after her father's funeral. She cares about exactly 2 things, her own comfort and other people's money. When she finds out I'm living here as more than hired help, she's going to assume I'm after your inheritance. Are you? Terry asked quietly. I looked at him, shocked. How can you even ask that? Because 48 years is a long time, Hilda. People change. And my wealth, he gestured around the elegant dining room, it has a way of changing how people see me. I stood abruptly, hurt flashing through me like a knife blade. If that's what you think of me, then maybe this was a mistake. Sit down. His voice was gentle but firm. Please. I had to ask. I've been burned before by people who claimed to love me but really loved my bank account. I needed to hear you say it. I remained standing, arms crossed. Say what? That you don't want my money? That you're here because of who I am, not what I have. I shouldn't have to say it. You should know it. You're right. I should. And deep down I do. But Hilda, you have to understand. When you have this much money, you question everyone's motives, even the people you love most. My anger deflated slightly. Is that how you've lived all these years? Not trusting anyone? Pretty much. He looked down at his hands. It's a lonely way to live, but it seemed safer than being hurt again. I sat back down, studying his face, the lines around his eyes, the way his mouth turned down at the corners. This was what success without love had done to him, turned him into a suspicious, isolated man. For the record, I said quietly, I don't want your money. I want you to leave every penny to charity if it makes you happy. I have my social security and a small pension. It's not much, but I've lived on less. Relief flooded his features. I'm sorry I had to ask. Don't apologize. Just don't ask again. I picked up my fork. Now, about Harlow. When she finds out about this, she's going to cause trouble. I need you to be prepared. Terry's expression hardened. What kind of trouble? She'll probably demand to know what your intentions are. Threaten to sue. Claim I'm taking advantage. She might even try to have me removed. Let her try. His voice carried the steel that had built his business empire. This is my house, Hilda. No one tells me who I can and cannot invite to live in it. I wished I shared his confidence. My phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. Harlow's name appeared. My stomach clenched. Speak of the devil, I murmured, showing Terry. Answer it, he said. Let's get this over with. I swiped to accept. Hello, Harlow. Mom. Her voice was tight with barely controlled anger. I just had the most interesting conversation with Mrs. Patterson from church. She said she saw you at the grocery store with some man in a wheelchair, and you were acting very familiar with him. I closed my eyes. In a town this size, of course, someone would see. Terry and I had gone for ingredients for the chocolate cake I missed. We probably did look intimate. His name is Terrence Hawthorne, I said carefully. He's the man I work for. Work for or work on? Harlow's voice dripped with accusation. Because Mrs. Patterson said you two looked awfully cozy for a professional relationship. Terry gestured for the phone, but I shook my head. This was my battle. Harlow, I'm 68 years old. I think I'm capable of conducting myself appropriately. Are you sleeping with him? The bluntness hit me like a slap. That's none of your business. It is if you're embarrassing our family name. Daddy's not even cold in the ground, and you're already throwing yourself at the first rich man who shows you attention. White-hot rage flooded through me. How dare you? Your father has been gone for 2 months, and I grieved for him properly. But I'm not dead, Harlow. I'm allowed to have companionship. Companionship? Harlow laughed coldly. Is that what we're calling gold digging now? Terry's face had gone pale with anger. He gestured more forcefully. This time, I handed it over. Miss Thompson, he said, his voice arctic. This is Terrence Hawthorne. I think there are some things you need to understand. I could hear Harlow's shocked silence. Then, suddenly much more respectful, Mr. Hawthorne, I didn't realize you were there. Clearly. Now listen very carefully, because I'm only going to say this once. Your mother is not a gold digger. She's not embarrassing anyone. And she's certainly not throwing herself at me. If anything, I'm the one pursuing her. Sir, I think there might be some misunderstanding. The only misunderstanding, Terry interrupted, is your belief that you have any say in your mother's personal life. She's a grown woman who can make her own decisions about who she spends time with. But she's vulnerable right now. She's grieving and she might not be thinking clearly. Your mother is one of the strongest, most clear-thinking women I've ever met. The fact that you can't see that says more about you than it does about her. The silence on the other end stretched out. When Harlow spoke again, her voice had taken on a different quality, harder, more calculating. Mr. Hawthorne, I appreciate your friendship with my mother, but I hope you understand my concern. I just want to make sure she's not being taken advantage of. The only person who's taken advantage of your mother recently, Terry said quietly, is you. Another silence. Then Harlow's icy voice, I'd like to meet with you, Mr. Hawthorne, to discuss this situation properly. Terry looked at me, eyebrows raised. I nodded reluctantly. Better to face this head-on. Fine, he said. Tomorrow afternoon, 2 o'clock. I'll be there. Harlow hung up without saying goodbye. Terry handed me back my phone, his jaw tight. Well, that went about as well as expected. I sank back in my chair, suddenly exhausted. She's going to try to turn you against me. She'll make it sound like I manipulated you, like I planned this whole thing. Let her try. Hilda, I need you to understand something. I didn't survive 48 years in business by being easily manipulated, and I certainly didn't build this empire by letting people tell me who I can and cannot care about. She can be very convincing when she wants to be. And I can be very stubborn when I need to be. Your daughter doesn't scare me. The only thing that scares me is the thought of losing you again. That night, I lay in my bed, staring at the ceiling, dreading the next afternoon's confrontation. I knew Harlow would come armed with arguments designed to drive a wedge between Terry and me. She'd paint me as a desperate widow preying on a lonely, disabled man. She'd question my motives, my timing, my very right to seek happiness again. But as I drifted off to sleep, I held on to Terry's words. The only thing that scares me is the thought of losing you again. Tomorrow I would find out if that was really true. Harlow arrived exactly at 2 o'clock, dressed in her best black suit, like she was attending a business meeting rather than visiting her mother. I watched from the window as she stepped out of her car, smoothing her skirt and checking her reflection in the side mirror. Even from a distance, I could see the calculation in her movements, the way she squared her shoulders like a soldier preparing for battle. Terry had insisted we meet in his study rather than one of the more comfortable sitting rooms. If she wants to treat this like a business negotiation, he'd said, then we'll meet her on those terms. Patricia showed Harlow in, and I felt my stomach clench as my daughter's eyes swept the room, taking in the expensive furnishings, the original artwork, the massive mahogany desk that probably cost more than most people's cars. I could practically see dollar signs reflecting in her pupils. Mr. Hawthorne. Harlow extended her hand with practiced grace. Thank you for agreeing to meet with me. Terry shook her hand briefly, his expression neutral. Miss Thompson, please have a seat. Harlow settled into the leather chair across from Terry's desk, crossing her legs and folding her hands in her lap. She looked like the successful real estate agent she was, all polished confidence and professional charm. Only I could see the tension in her jaw, the slight tremor in her fingers. I hope you understand that I'm only here out of concern for my mother, she began, her voice warm with false sincerity. She's been through so much lately, and I'm worried that she might be making decisions based on emotion rather than logic. And what decisions would those be? Terry asked mildly. Harlow glanced at me, then back at Terry. Well, this living arrangement, for one, it's highly unusual for a caregiver to move into the employer's personal quarters. It raises questions about the nature of your relationship. What kind of questions? Terry's voice remained calm, but I could hear the steel underneath. Questions about boundaries, about appropriate professional conduct. Harlow leaned forward slightly. Mr. Hawthorne, I'm sure you're a lovely man, but my mother is vulnerable right now. She's grieving. She's financially insecure, and she might be confusing gratitude with other feelings. I felt heat rise in my cheeks. Harlow, that's enough. It's all right, Hilda. Terry never took his eyes off my daughter. I'd like to hear what Miss Thompson has to say. Harlow shot me a warning look, then turned back to Terry with renewed confidence. I'm saying that my mother has always been somewhat impressionable. She sees the best in people, sometimes to her detriment. And in her current state, she might not be thinking clearly about the implications of this situation. The implications being what exactly? Well, there's the obvious concern about what people will think. A widow moving in with a wealthy man so soon after her husband's death. It doesn't look good. Harlow's voice took on a concerned, caring tone that made my skin crawl. And then there's the question of what happens when this arrangement ends. Will my mother be left with nothing again? Will she have to start over once more? Terry leaned back in his wheelchair, his fingers steepled in front of him. Those are interesting points. Tell me, Miss Thompson, what do you think would be best for your mother? Harlow's eyes lit up, thinking she'd found an opening. I think she should come home, back to her family, where she belongs, where she can grieve properly and make rational decisions about her future. And by home, Terry asked quietly, his voice laced with ice, you mean the house you inherited from your father? The house you asked her to leave? Harlow had the grace to look uncomfortable. That was a misunderstanding. I was emotional, dealing with my own grief. Of course, my mother is always welcome in my home. For how long? Terry asked quietly. Harlow blinked. I'm sorry. How long would your mother be welcome? Until you decide she's a burden again? Until the next time you need space for your own family. Harlow's mask slipped slightly. Mr. Hawthorne, I don't think you understand the complexity of family relationships. Oh, I understand perfectly. Terry's voice cut through her words like a blade. I understand that you threw your mother out 3 weeks after burying her husband of 45 years. I understand that you gave her an ultimatum, work or live on the street. And I understand that the only reason you're here now is because you've realized she might have found something better than what you were offering. Harlow's face flushed red. That's not. I was protecting her, teaching her to be independent. By making her homeless? She wasn't homeless. She had options. Harlow looked frantically between Terry and me, clearly not expecting to be put on the defensive. She could have found an apartment. She has Social Security, $800 a month, Terry said quietly. Do you know what the average rent is in this area, Miss Thompson? Harlow's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. $1,200, Terry continued. For a one-bedroom apartment in a decent neighborhood. Your mother would have been $400 short every month just for housing. That doesn't include food, utilities, medical expenses, or any of the other costs of living. She could have found something cheaper. Where? In what part of town? You were willing to let your 68-year-old mother live in poverty rather than inconvenience yourself. I watched this exchange with a mixture of satisfaction and sadness. Satisfaction because someone was finally holding Harlow accountable for her cruelty. Sadness because that someone had to be a stranger rather than my daughter's own conscience. Harlow's professional composure was cracking rapidly. You don't understand. My mother, she's always been difficult. High maintenance. She expects everyone to take care of her. High maintenance? I couldn't stay silent anymore. Harlow, I worked 2 jobs to put you through college. I took care of your father through 5 years of cancer treatments without a single complaint. I babysat your children every weekend for free. And I've never asked you for anything except a place to grieve my husband. You were smothering me. Harlow exploded, her mask finally falling away completely. Always hovering. Always trying to help. Always making me feel guilty for having my own life. I needed space to breathe. So you threw me out, I said quietly. I gave you a chance to stand on your own 2 feet for once. The silence that followed was deafening. Terry looked at Harlow with an expression of such cold disgust that she actually shrank back in her chair. Miss Thompson, he said finally. I think we're done here. Wait. Harlow's voice was desperate now. You don't understand what you're getting into. My mother, she has expectations. She'll want marriage, security, legal protections. She's not just looking for companionship. Terry's expression didn't change. And what if she is looking for those things? What if I want to give them to her? Harlow went very still. What are you saying? I'm saying that your mother and I are both adults who can make our own decisions about our relationship. Whether that relationship remains as it is now or develops into something more is none of your concern. Something more. Harlow's voice was barely a whisper. Terry reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a small velvet box. The same box he'd shown me in the conservatory containing the silver ring from our youth. Your mother and I have a history that predates your father. Predates you. Predates everything you think you know about her life. Harlow stared at the box like it was a poisonous snake. What kind of history? The kind that matters, Terry said simply. We loved each other once, very deeply. Circumstances separated us, but they didn't destroy what we felt. And now, 48 years later, we have a chance to see if what we had was real enough to survive time and change. You're talking about marriage? Harlow's voice was flat, emotionless. I'm talking about living the life we should have lived all along. Harlow turned to me, her eyes blazing with a fury I'd never seen before. This is why you took this job, isn't it? You knew who he was. You planned this whole thing. No, I said firmly. I had no idea Terry was here when I answered that job listing. I thought he was dead or married or living on the other side of the world. The last thing I expected was to find him in that wheelchair, in this house. Terry? Harlow's voice dripped with venom. You call him Terry? That's my name, Terry said calmly. Terrence is what my business associates call me. Terry is what the people I love call me. Harlow stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the hardwood floor. This is insane. You're both insane. You think you can just pick up where you left off 48 years ago? You think you can erase an entire lifetime? We're not trying to erase anything, I said. We're trying to build something new from what's left. What about Daddy? What about your marriage, your family, everything you built together? Your father was a good man and I loved him. But Terry was my first love, and some things never really end. Harlow looked between us with growing panic. He's using you, Mom. Can't you see that? He's lonely and disabled, and you're convenient. When he gets tired of playing house, you'll be out on the street again. That's enough. Terry's voice cut through the air like a whip. You will not speak about your mother that way in my house. Your house. Harlow laughed bitterly. Yes, let's talk about your house. Your money. Your power. That's what this is really about, isn't it? Terry opened the desk drawer again and pulled out a thick legal document. Since you seem so concerned about money, perhaps you should know that I've already updated my will. Everything I own is going to charity. The Children's Hospital, the Homeless Shelter, the Animal Rescue Foundation. Your mother won't inherit a penny from me. Harlow stared at the document, her face going white. You what? I told him to do it, I said quietly. I don't want his money, Harlow. I never did. I want him. Something in my daughter's face collapsed then, like a building with all its supports suddenly removed. For a moment, she looked like the little girl who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms, frightened and confused and desperately in need of comfort. But then the mask snapped back into place, harder and colder than before. Fine, she said, her voice like ice. Fine. Throw your life away on some fantasy from 50 years ago. But don't come crying to me when it all falls apart. She turned and walked toward the door, then paused with her hand on the handle. And don't expect me to be here to pick up the pieces when he's done with you. The door slammed behind her with enough force to rattle the windows. Terry and I sat in silence for several minutes, listening to the sound of Harlow's car starting and driving away. Finally, Terry reached across the desk and took my hand. Are you all right? I thought about the question, testing my emotions like prodding a sore tooth. Was I all right? My daughter had just disowned me, accused me of being a gold digger and a fool, and stormed out of my life with every intention of never coming back. But for the first time in months, maybe years, I felt free. Yes, I said, surprising myself with how steady my voice sounded. I think I am. 6 months later, I stood in the same conservatory where Terry and I had first acknowledged our past. But everything had changed. The morning light streaming through the glass walls caught the simple gold band on my left hand. Not the elaborate diamond Terry had once promised to replace my silver ring with, but something better. Something chosen by the people we'd become, rather than the dreams of who we thought we'd be. We'd married quietly 3 weeks ago with only Patricia and Terry's lawyer as witnesses. It wasn't the grand wedding I'd imagined as a 20-year-old girl, but it was perfect in its simplicity. Two people who'd found their way back to each other against all odds, promising to spend whatever time they had left together. Mrs. Hawthorne, Patricia said, entering the conservatory with her usual brisk efficiency, but I caught the small smile she tried to hide. Even Patricia, stern and practical as she was, had softened toward our unlikely romance. There's someone at the front door asking to see you. My heart clenched. I'd been expecting this visit for months, ever since the wedding announcement appeared in the local paper. Harlow had maintained her silence since that awful confrontation in Terry's study. But I knew she'd heard the news. In a town this size, everyone knew everyone's business. Who is it? I asked, though I already knew. Your daughter, ma'am. She seems upset. I found Terry in his study reviewing quarterly reports for the foundation he'd established to manage his charitable giving. He looked up as I entered, immediately reading the tension in my face. She's here, I said simply. Terry set down his papers and wheeled his chair around to face me. Do you want me to handle this? No, she's my daughter. This is my conversation to have. I smoothed my hands over my skirt, trying to calm my nerves. But I'd like you to be there if you don't mind. Of course. We found Harlow in the formal living room, perched on the edge of a velvet settee, like she was ready to bolt at any moment. She'd lost weight since I'd last seen her, and there were dark circles under her eyes that makeup couldn't quite hide. She looked older, more fragile, and for a moment, my maternal instincts kicked in. Harlow. I kept my voice neutral, neither welcoming nor hostile. Mom. She stood up, wrapping her arms around herself defensively. Congratulations on your marriage. I heard it was lovely. It was. I settled into the chair across from her, Terry positioning his wheelchair beside me. Simple but lovely. Harlow's eyes darted to our joined hands, to the matching gold bands we wore. You actually did it. You actually married him. I did. For better or worse, richer or poorer, in sickness and in health. There was an edge to her voice, a bitterness that made my heart ache. All of it, I said firmly. Every vow, every promise. Harlow laughed, but it sounded more like a sob. You know what the worst part is? I actually thought you might come back after the novelty wore off. After you realized what you'd given up, I thought you'd come home. This is my home now. With him. She looked at Terry with barely concealed resentment. With a man you barely know anymore. I know him better than you think, I said quietly. And more importantly, I know myself better than I did 6 months ago. Harlow was quiet for a long moment, staring at the Persian rug beneath her feet. When she looked up again, her eyes were bright with unshed tears. I've been thinking about what you said about Daddy and your first love and things never really ending. She took a shaky breath. I went through Daddy's papers after you left. I found some letters. My breath caught. What kind of letters? Love letters to someone named Jennifer. Dated from 2 years before he died. Harlow's voice was barely a whisper. He was having an affair, Mom. For at least 2 years, maybe longer. The words hit me like a physical blow. Dante, my steady, faithful Dante, had been unfaithful. While I was caring for him through his illness, while I was holding his hand through chemotherapy and pretending not to notice how much weight he was losing, he was writing love letters to another woman. Terry's hand tightened around mine, grounding me, keeping me steady. I'm sorry, Harlow continued. I know it hurts, but I thought you should know that maybe your marriage wasn't as perfect as I always believed it was. I closed my eyes, processing this revelation. It should have destroyed me. It should have made me question everything I thought I knew about my life with Dante. Instead, I felt something unexpected. Relief. Thank you for telling me, I said finally. Harlow looked surprised. You're not angry? I'm sad, disappointed, but not angry. I thought about how to explain what I was feeling. Your father was a good man who made some poor choices. That doesn't erase the good years we had together, but it does put things in perspective. What kind of perspective? The perspective that maybe I don't owe my entire life to his memory. Maybe I don't have to feel guilty for finding happiness again. Harlow was crying now, tears streaming down her face unchecked. I was so jealous of you, Mom. So angry that you could just move on, start over, be happy. I couldn't understand how you could forget Daddy so easily. I didn't forget him. I never will. But I also couldn't stay frozen in grief forever. And I made it worse by throwing you out. Harlow's voice broke completely. I was so hurt, so angry about the affair. And I took it out on you. I blamed you for not being enough to keep him faithful. And then I blamed you for being too much when you needed support. The pieces of my daughter's behavior finally clicked into place. The sudden coldness after Dante's funeral, the cruel ultimatum, the desperate need to control my life. Harlow hadn't been protecting herself from my grief. She'd been drowning in her own anger and disappointment. Oh, sweetheart. I stood up and moved to sit beside her on the settee. You should have told me. How could I? How could I tell you that your perfect husband was a cheater? That everything you believed about your marriage was a lie? It wasn't all a lie, I said gently. The early years were real. The love was real, even if it changed over time. And you were real. The best thing that came out of that marriage. Harlow leaned against me. And for the first time in months, she felt like my daughter again instead of a stranger wearing a familiar face. I've been so awful to you, she whispered. You've been hurting. There's a difference. Can you forgive me? I looked across the room at Terry, who was watching us with quiet understanding. He nodded slightly, encouraging me to follow my heart. I forgive you, I said. But things can't go back to the way they were. I'm not the same person I was 6 months ago. And neither are you. Harlow pulled back to look at me. What does that mean? It means that if you want to be part of my life, you need to accept my choices, all of them. You need to respect my marriage, my husband, and my right to be happy. And if I can't, then we'll love each other from a distance. I won't let anyone, not even you, make me feel ashamed of the life I'm building. Harlow was quiet for a long time, considering my words. Finally, she turned to Terry. I owe you an apology too, she said. I said terrible things about you, about your relationship with Mom. I was wrong. Terry inclined his head graciously. Grief makes us all say things we don't mean. Do you really love her? With everything I have, Terry said without hesitation. I've loved her for 48 years. Finding her again is the greatest gift I've ever received. Harlow looked between us, taking in the way Terry's eyes softened when he looked at me. The way my hand automatically sought his whenever I was nervous or excited. Slowly, something in her expression shifted. I can see it, she said wonderingly. The way you look at each other. It's like you're the only two people in the world. Sometimes it feels that way, I admitted. Harlow was quiet again, then asked, Are you happy, Mom? Really? Truly happy? I thought about the question, about the life I'd built in this house with this man. The quiet mornings we spent reading together in the conservatory. The way Terry still brought me wildflowers from the garden because he remembered they were my favorite. The contentment I felt falling asleep beside him each night knowing that whatever time we had left, we were spending it together. Yes, I said. I'm happy. Harlow nodded slowly, then stood up. Then I guess I need to learn to be happy for you. Does that mean? It means I want to try? I want to be part of your life if you'll let me. I want to get to know Terry as your husband instead of your employer. And I want to make up for the months I wasted being angry and jealous and cruel. I stood and hugged her. Really hugged her for the first time since Dante's funeral. I'd like that very much. As Harlow pulled back, she glanced around the elegant living room, then back at me. This is really your home now. It is. And you're really Mrs. Hawthorne. I am. She smiled then. The first genuine smile I'd seen from her in over a year. It's going to take some getting used to, but Mom, yes, you deserve this. You deserve to be loved and cherished and spoiled a little bit. I'm sorry it took me so long to see that. After Harlow left, promising to call soon and asking if she could bring her children to meet their new step-grandfather, Terry and I sat together in the garden, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and rose. Do you think she means it? I asked about wanting to rebuild our relationship. I think she's her mother's daughter, Terry said. Which means she's stronger and more forgiving than she gives herself credit for. I leaned back in my chair, feeling the last of the tension leave my shoulders. For the first time in years, all the pieces of my life seemed to be falling into place. Terry, I said, thank you for fighting for us, for not giving up when things got complicated. He brought my hand to his lips and kissed it softly. Thank you for taking a chance on an old love with an older man. For seeing past the wheelchair and the walls I'd built around my heart. We're quite a pair, aren't we? Two people in their 70s starting over like teenagers. The best kind of pair, Terry said. The kind that knows how precious love really is and doesn't waste time taking it for granted. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, I thought about the journey that had brought me here. The pain of losing Dante. The humiliation of being cast out by my own daughter. The fear of starting over with nothing but my memories and my pride. But sometimes, I realized, you have to lose everything to find what you were really looking for all along. And sometimes the love you thought was lost forever has just been waiting patiently for you to come home. This story taught me so much about forgiveness, second chances, and finding your own happiness, no matter what. I'm curious to hear from you. What part of my journey resonated with you the most? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to know what you think.